There have been some epic superhero team-ups over the years, but there have also been some really strange ones. This is the one that probably makes the most sense on this list, believe it or not, because the original Batman has always been a detective above everything, with his original comics actually being called Detective Comics. This adventure is actually number 572 of that comic series, and the pairing somehow just seems weirdly right. The only thing is that the Sherlock Holmes stories typically take place in the 1800s, well before Batman's time. So the way they make this work is by just simply having Sherlock be super duper old. Over 100 years old, actually. It works well enough, I guess. The plot is basically that Batman is facing a challenge trying to take down Moriarty and takes Sherlock's help to solve the issue. This is back in the day when Batman was still pretty peppy and fun, bringing Robin along for the ride and everything, so the pair-up kind of works in tone as well. It's a fun little moment in time that brings one of the most influential detectives of one era and pairs him up with one of the most influential detectives of this era. All this considered though, it's still weird, and I needed to put it on the list. At number 9 we have X-Men vs Star Trek. This is a very weird pairing because Marvel could have easily paired up Star Trek with another team that's more synonymous with space travel, like, you know, the Guardians of the Galaxy. But on the other hand, the X-Men do always show an interest in teaming up with and supporting humans, and they sometimes do go into space, so it sort of works. Relatively speaking, that is, in comparison to what else you'll see on this list later. But all in all, this team up is pretty fun, showing off some fun traits of both teams, like Spock using the Vulcan pinch on Wolverine before they become friendly with one another. But the fun and games subside when the teams are tasked with taking on the threat of the mutant Proteus. This team up actually worked well enough when it was released that they even got a few sequels, so there's that. At number 8 we have Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, this team up actually happened. When Shredder comes to Gotham and teams up with Ra's al Ghul and they try and, you know, take over the world together, Batman naturally enters the picture. But so do the 4 Ninja Turtles. The contrast between this darker, more modern Batman and the very fun but very annoying Ninja Turtles makes for a funny combination that is known to actually be pretty good, all things considered. And something about this team up actually does feel right for some reason. Maybe it's the setting of Gotham seeming like it fits for the Turtles, and maybe also something about the dynamic of these characters. Batman does seem like the perfect straight man to the silliness of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Regardless, it is weird, but fun, but weird, but fun, and needed a spot on the list. At number 7 is Superman and the Nesquik Bunny. So as we go deeper into the list, things are getting a little weirder, yes. This one strikes me as bizarre for sure, but also somewhat fitting considering cereal companies love to pair characters from pop culture with their brands. But still, that's the only slack I'm gonna cut it. It's sort of weird that there is an actual comic book about it because it sort of messes with the canon of Superman. But alas, it happened, and it was bananas. Basically just a really long ad for cereal and a pretty weak plot. The villain in this one is Weather Wizard, and somehow Superman has genuine trouble taking him down. So who does he call? A group of young children and a rabbit. And even after their victory, there's a chocolate milk chugging challenge that Superman somehow even loses to the bunny. It's just a bizarre journey of sellouts and awkward writing, but I live for things like this that shouldn't exist but do. It just makes things more fun. At number 6 there's Batman and Scooby-Doo. Another strangely fitting pairing. This comic made me realize just how many detective characters there actually are out there, and why they keep insisting on teaming up with one another. In this team up, the villain is Man-Bat, which is actually a great choice because he's one of the few Batman villains that's actually a monster, which fits with the Scooby-Doo brand. But this weird match actually isn't the last time people see the Scooby-Doo franchise work its way into the comic book world. Later on, Scooby-Doo will eventually become a sidekick to Ace the Bat Hound and continue to solve crimes alongside him. Although I'll be honest, I haven't checked out how those issues looked. Couldn't imagine them being able to fit in anything too dark with Scooby-Doo around, you know? They should never have to know the violence that takes place on the streets of Gotham. At number 5 is a weird one for sure. The Avengers actually team up with the Guardians of the Galaxy to face off against Titans from the Attack on Titan universe. This issue is called Attack on Avengers, naturally, and it's a super short 8 pages long. Basically, the plot is that the Titans just show up in New York City and start causing problems. Problems like eating people, you know? What I find strange about this, aside from the obvious, is that the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy pair up in the first place. I feel like it's already a complicated enough concept to have the Avengers versus Attack on Titan, but then they just go and complicate it even further, which is just strange. It doesn't get in the way of it, it's just weird. It's known to be a pretty fun read though. It doesn't go deep into any complex plot or anything, it just sort of has the heroes show off their abilities one after the other to take down the Titans. It's unclear who wins the battle though, with the issue just kind of ending with the Guardians of the Galaxy tapping in to do some Titan killing of their own. At number 4, we have a personal favorite of mine, The Punisher teaming up with Eminem. When I found out this team up took place, I was so happy. It's just such a good fit given their darker personalities and makes me like Eminem more that he'd even go for something like this. This comic came out back in 2009, the same year that Eminem released his Relapse album, just for context for all you Eminem fans out there. The plot is pretty simple, with Barracuda being the villain in the comic that the two team up to take down. The strange part of this issue, other than the part where Eminem and the Punisher are teaming up, is a decision which I think was a bit of a misstep, and it's that Eminem is totally OP. He beats up the Punisher before they even team up for one, which I guess gives Eminem a pretty impressive power stat canonically, and then when they're kidnapped by Barracuda and taken to the Arctic to be killed, Eminem breaks free and saves the Punisher, killing Barracuda with a chainsaw in the process, which sort of weakens the integrity of the Punisher just to boost Eminem. I feel like they could have easily played with Eminem's funny personality a little more and had the two characters play off each other to give us a more humble and dynamic story. But maybe Eminem just said yes to this gig so he could look cool, and somehow even more badass than the Punisher. At number 3, we have Superman teaming up with Bugs Bunny. You heard me correctly. This team up could also just as easily be considered a DC Comics and Looney Tunes crossover, but out of all the different characters from both franchises, Bugs and Superman are two of the more significant characters who end up associating with one another, which is just a bonkers duo to have teamed up in the first place. The way that these worlds collide is that Mxyzptlk and Yo-Yo the Dodo basically just manipulate reality to make the pair up happen for fun, which I guess is the only real way to justify something as weird as this. They don't really do much as a pair, but you can imagine that Bugs just kind of wanders around and quips while Superman tries to figure out how to get him to focus. There's more to it than that, I'm sure, but honestly you'd have to pay me to actually read all the way through this thing. No offense if this is a favorite of yours, I don't know. I saw the cover and I couldn't do it. At number 2 is kind of a part 2 to number 3, if that sentence made any sense. It's Batman and Elmer Fudd. This is just the most bizarre team up, again, with the very loose through line that they're both sort of detectives. Elmer is a hunter, but he's usually like creeping around looking for Bugs Bunny clues and stuff. Either way, this issue is actually known to be strangely good and suspenseful, considering what it is. It has Elmer Fudd partaking in a dark noir storyline on the hunt for a mysterious killer known as the Bunny. But things keep getting more complicated for Fudd when Batman turns out to be the real culprit. Believe it or not, this is a different storyline from the previous entry, which just makes me wonder how the hell Looney Tunes and DC Comics kept thinking it would be a smart idea to give their characters crossovers. Although, it seemingly worked for people. People seem to like this one with Elmer Fudd, so maybe they were onto something. At number 1 is a very, very strange one. Batman and the Beatles, or the copyright-free version of the Beatles anyway. This one doesn't seem to have any common thread to tie these two pop culture worlds together. I really tried to think of one, but I just couldn't. Maybe the writer was just a big Beatles fan and wanted an excuse to get in touch with Paul McCartney's people if he needed to. Maybe they were safe from copyright because they don't really look like them. I mean, to be fair, the plot of the comic is about as clever as it could have been given the pairing. Batman is basically trying to investigate whether or not Paul of the Beatles is actually dead. For those of you who don't know, there was a fan-generated rumor years ago floating around about the idea that Paul had actually died and was secretly replaced by a guy named William Campbell. So this ridiculous theory is what Batman is trying to get to the bottom of. And what ends up happening, spoiler alert, is that Batman actually discovers it was the other members of the band who were the fake, and that Paul was the only original member of the band remaining, which is it's riveting stuff. And super bizarre. Perfectly bizarre.
Number 10. Batman and Scooby-Doo. Batman and the gang of meddling kids from Mystery Incorporated actually have quite a long history together, teaming up during the days when Batman cartoons and Scooby-Doo cartoons were both being made by Hanna-Barbera for the odd animated special. Years later, this pairing would make its way into the pages of the comics, with the Dark Knight going on several adventures with the gang. It makes a certain kind of sense. I mean, mean, Batman and the gang are all detectives, so they have a lot of intersecting interests. The comic book series also does a good job of going with a more Silver Age-y take on Batman, so there isn't as much of a clash in tone when Batman pulls Scooby snacks out of his utility belt. But there is still something kind of strange about the idea that Batman would get so stumped on a case that he would call in not another detective hero like, say, Barry Allen, but would go straight to a bunch of teenage jazz cabbage enthusiasts who live in a van with their dog. Number 9. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Ghostbusters. When Donatello of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles created an interspatial teleportation unit, he asked his brothers Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Raphael to help him test the device's capabilities. They go through the portal with their friends April O'Neil and Casey Jones and discover that the device has transported them to a different New York, the one featured in the Ghostbusters universe. They are immediately put face to face with an evil ghost who of course is immune to their attacks and captures and possesses Casey. Thankfully, they are soon saved by everyone's favorite group of paranormal exterminators, Venkman, Winston, Egon, and Ray, the Ghostbusters. The two groups team up and the combination works better than you might expect. There's a certain joy to seeing Venkman start to get on Raph's nerves, while Winston and Leonardo bond over how difficult it is to be the most normal one on a team. Plus, seeing Leonardo swap his bow staff for a proton pack is something I never knew I always wanted to see. Number 8. Superman and Muhammad Ali. This one is perhaps the most iconic of the weird team-ups ever put to panel. One day, Muhammad Ali is in Metropolis playing basketball with some local kids, and Lois, Jimmy, and Clark set out to get an interview with him. Just as they are about to begin their interview, an alien shows up and requests the greatest champion of Earth to fight in an alien boxing match. He has an armada of ships and is going to blow up Earth if they don't accept the challenge. Clark excuses himself and Superman shows up offering to fight. Ali retorts that he will fight the aliens as he is the greatest fighter on Earth. Superman points out that that is a stupid plan because he's, you know, Superman, but Ali reminds him that he's, you know, Muhammad Ali. The alien tells them that they will fight and the winner will face the alien champion. Ali and Superman go to the Fortress of Solitude to train, and Ali teaches Supes some of his moves before they are interrupted by the aliens, who inform them that the fight will take place on their homeworld, which has a red sun, meaning Superman won't have any powers. Ali points out that Superman is in serious trouble. The two have a boxing match, and Ali KOs Superman after a few rounds and goes on to fight the alien champion. It turns out that Superman and Ali fixed the fight, and while Ali fights, Superman is taking out the alien fleet. Ali wins the match and the Earth is saved. Later on Earth, Ali reveals that he has figured out Superman's secret identity, and the two shake hands as Ali declares, "Superman, we are the greatest." It's a weird story and kinda goofy, but it has become such a classic, and the dynamic between Superman and Muhammad Ali is actually so well done that it is worth reading. Number 7. The Avengers meet David Letterman. In Avengers number 239, Wonder Man is having a bit of a problem. He has been trying to make it as an actor, but it hasn't been working out. His agent is aware of his status as a reserve Avenger and books Wonder Man on David Letterman, claiming that he will be accompanied by some of the other Avengers. Wonder Man reaches out to Vision, who arranges for himself, Black Panther, Hawkeye, Beast, and Black Widow to join Wonder Man on the late-night talk show appearance. The villain, Fabian Stanowitz, otherwise known as the Meccano Marauder, sees the promo and decides that he will also be attending. The Avengers go on the show, and Dave interviews the group, getting the bombshell that Beast is leaving the Avengers to start the Defenders, but the interview is interrupted by an attack from Fabian's machines, while Paul Schaefer keeps the band playing to keep the crowd from panicking. Fabian sits down for an interview with Letterman, surrounding them with a force field so they won't be interrupted by the Avengers or the machines. Dave then uses his classic giant doorknob prop to knock out the villain, saving the day. Wonder Man is thrilled that his heroic exploits will be shown on television, but when the show is set to air, it is interrupted by a special news bulletin and no one gets to see it. Number 6. The X-Men meet the crew of the Enterprise. Captain's log. Stardate 4740.5. The crew of the Enterprise came across an odd alien ship. They scanned it for life and saw that it was carrying 7 life forms that sensors indicated were near human. Before more information could be gathered, the ship exploded, and a giant creature calling himself the Gladiator appeared and punched the Enterprise. As the engineer, Mr. Scott attempted to repair the damage to the shields, a group of stowaways who had beamed off the destroyed ship at the last moment came aboard. They called themselves the X-Men. So the X-Men had set off to save the galaxy, and were now hiding on the Enterprise, very confused as to how they had ended up in the future. Gambit was injured, and Beast took him to the ship's sickbay to find treatment. It was here that Dr. McCoy met Dr. McCoy. The remaining X-Men were discovered by Mr. Spock, who incapacitated Wolverine with the Vulcan nerve pinch and took the team to meet Captain Kirk so they could work together to defeat the villains. This is a fun story filled with some cool moments like the aforementioned Spock and Wolverine fight, as well as some fun character moments like Kirk trying to hit on Jean Grey. But the X-Men and Enterprise crew are an odd pair to pitch together, and the entire affair does feel pretty weird. Number 5. The Punisher meets Slim Shady. Getting into the really weird team-ups, we have the time that Frank Castle met Marshall Mathers. In this story, Eminem is leaving a concert with his security when they come across a strange man in a skull shirt in the alley. They pull their guns on him and get absolutely blown away while M makes a break for it. He's rescued by his childhood friend, the Barracuda, who helps him hide from Castle. When Punisher gets too close, Slim Shady beats him up and shoots him. Barracuda then takes out Eminem, and when he wakes up, he's on a boat tied back to back with the Punisher. Punisher explains that he was trying to protect Eminem and only took out his bodyguards because they pulled guns on him and probably all had rap sheets anyways. Barracuda explains that the Parents Music Council has hired him to kill Shady because they think his music is corrupting the youth. He throws M off the side of the boat, but the water is frozen and he manages to get away. He finds an ice fisherman, takes his chainsaw, and returns to the boat to save the Punisher. After freeing Frank, Punisher leaves Eminem stranded on the ice with a phone to call for help as he sets off to take out the Parents Music Council. After all, hiring a contract killer is a serious crime. What? This book is insane! Not just for the premise, but the fact that the Punisher doesn't do anything except get beaten up and later rescued by Eminem. But it isn't the weirdest Punisher crossover. More on that later. Number 4, Spider-Man and the cast of SNL. Live from New York, it's Spider Day Night Live! Starring Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Bill Murray, Lorraine Newman, and Gilda Radner. In Marvel Team-Up number 74, Spider-Man got to team up with the classic Saturday Night Live cast in one of the weirdest team-ups in the Wall Crawlers history. Peter and MJ are attending a filming of Saturday Night Live, but little do they know that the show is about to be interrupted by the Silver Samurai, whose magic ring has been sent to John Belushi by accident due to his SNL Samurai character being mistaken for the Silver Samurai. Thugs try to take over the show, but the cast keeps the show going while taking out the thugs with the help of Spider-Man, while the two samurai face off backstage. It is extra weird because the celebrity host is Stan Lee, and the SNL cast are dressing up as Marvel characters. But in a world where Marvel heroes are real, what exactly is Stan Lee famous for? Number 3, Jimmy Olsen and Don Rickles. In Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 141, written by Jack Kirby of all people, Jimmy teams up with the Golden Guardian and Goody Rickles, the superhero who just happens to look like the insult comic and Mr. Potato Head actor Don Rickles. They are poisoned by Intergang and have to find a cure before they explode. They end up at an office where the real Don Rickles is hanging out and just starts slowly going nuts as superhero hijinks take place around him. Eventually the heroes are cured, but Rickles is taken away by the police after claiming that he is going to explode in an effort to get away from Jimmy and his gang. It is a difficult story to follow and wouldn't make this list if it weren't for the weird detail of Don Rickles having a superhero who is not related to him, but is named Goody Rickles and just happens to look exactly like him. That's just all kinds of strange. Number 2, The Punisher meets Archie. In a crossover that started out as a joke between the publishers of the two characters, a criminal who looks remarkably like Archie is being chased by the Punisher. He escapes to Riverdale, and the Punisher pursues him there. Archie is up to his usual hijinks, trying to date both Betty and Veronica, when a bunch of feds, mistaking him for his criminal doppelganger, take him away. They are attacked by the Punisher, who realizes his mistake and goes after the double, who has taken Veronica to the town's sock hop. Punisher goes to the dance and is mistaken for a chaperone by the teachers. Things go off the rails when the villain takes Veronica hostage and a shootout breaks out at the dance. The bad guy gets away with Ronnie, and Archie has to team up with Frank to take him out. Archie starts keeping a war journal, and Frank gets a nice Riverdale sweater as a gift, and together they save Veronica and stop the villain, who they tie to a giant balloon and let fly away, presumably so he will fly into the air and lose oxygen and die. As if all of this wasn't weird enough, the story ends with Professor X informing Wolverine that he has to go after the most dangerous mutant alive, Jughead. Number 1. Green Lantern and Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders has shown up in DC Comics stories a few times, having traveled the multiverse and hired Captain Cold and Mirror Master to work in his restaurants. But his weirdest story is when he teamed up with Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern. In this story, the Colonel is working with Ferris Air to test that his new packaging for his Zinger chicken sandwich will protect it for interstellar travel, as he wants to bring his food across the universe. He enlists the help of Green Lantern to help him deliver the food, and Hal agrees. As Hal tells him, every member of the Green Lantern Corps is working on this project. Meaning somewhere a planet is being attacked by Darkseid and the Lanterns are delivering chicken sandwiches. The sandwiches are all stolen by the Orange Lantern Larfleeze, and Hal creates a KFC themed Green Lantern ring for the Colonel so they can go after the sandwiches. Sanders attacks Larfleeze with a drumstick construct, and Larfleeze admits that the Zinger chicken sandwich is the only thing that has ever satisfied his unending longing and hunger. Sanders uses his ring to create the first KFC on the planet Okara and lets Larfleeze sign on as a franchisee, assuming that the Orange Lantern can complete the training program to get his cooking to the Colonel's strict standards. This book is so weird. It's like those old Twinkie ads where Flash would defeat Weather Wizard with the delicious taste of Hostess Twinkie cakes, but instead of being one page long, it's the entire comic. It's so weird.
Number 10. Mockingbird. In this story from 1980, Spider-Man heads off to Los Angeles and has a run-in with Mockingbird, as well as Nick Fury. This issue fleshes out a lot of the world of S.H.I.E.L.D. and features some stuff that comes up in the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is far from the weirdest choice on the list, but still has a lot of really weird moments, like Spider-Man pulling a guy from a flying car and tossing him to the street 20 feet below. It's a pretty fun issue, with a lot of great moments with the aforementioned flying car, and Mockingbird kicking some real butt with her battle staves. It's S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Mockingbird, with Spider-Man sort of caught in the middle. He doesn't even like being in LA. Thankfully, things work out for Mockingbird in the end, and she survives getting totally blasted by S.H.I.E.L.D. She actually has quite a career with Marvel, getting her own comic series in 2016, and was even voted number 48 out of 50 in IGN's top 50 Avengers. She barely made the list, just like this list. Number 9. Ghost Rider. Now these two definitely make for an unusual pairing. I feel like Ghost Rider with his pen and stare is pretty much the furthest possible thing from the tongue-lashing Spidey dishes out with the endless quips and puns. In this story, called If an Eye Offend Thee, our dynamic duo goes up against Orb, a mysterious villain with a giant eyeball for a head. Peter Parker and MJ see a billboard advertising Ghost Rider's latest stunt show and decide to come and watch, blow off some steam, you know? Pete is really impressed by Ghost Rider's makeup, not suspecting he's actually possessed by a demon. During the show, Orb shows up and entrances the guards and the crowd just by looking at them with his giant eyeball, then attempts to kidnap Ghost Rider's girlfriend Roxanne. Ghost Rider is unable to catch Orb as he uses his hypnosis to make audience members walk in front of the Ghost Rider, causing him to wipe out on his cycle. In the stunning conclusion, they leap out of the way of a train, Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, but Orb is not so lucky and totally gets hit. However, when they search the scene afterwards, they fail to locate Orb's body. Finally, Spider-Man swings off into the night, a bit disturbed by Ghost Rider's comment that he's not wearing a mask or makeup. Number 8. The Werewolf by Night. In this issue, Spidey is on the move again, this time to San Francisco on an assignment for the Daily Bugle. Exploring the Golden Gate Bridge, he barely reacts in time when the werewolf leaps out from a hiding place and attacks. Spidey stops the both of them from falling to their deaths with a quick bit of webbing action, and then tosses Werewolf off of the bridge into the water. The end. I'm just kidding. Werewolf does appear again later, but during the encounter, the sun rises and Peter witnesses him changing back into his human form, Jack Russell. Spidey decides to help Jack, and before long, he's confronting Moondark in a theater, taking him down and helping the werewolf to return to normal, no longer under Moondark's influence. Spidey does a lot of monologuing in this issue, recounting the recent death of Gwen Stacy and other recent events in his run. Also neat fact, Spidey's adventures in San Francisco continue along in the next Daredevil, issue 103, where those two meet up and team up against Ramrod. Black Widow is actually in that episode too. Team ups! Number 7. Red Sonja. Spider-Man and Red Sonja actually had an exciting romantically charged adventure recently across 5 issues in 2007, but I'm talking about their first encounter in Marvel Team-Up number 79 from 1979 called Sword of the She-Devil. Red Sonja first appeared as a character in Conan the Barbarian, but she went on to have her very own popular series and even a movie in the 80s. In this epic issue, we see worlds collide as Mary Jane transforms into Red Sonja. Red Sonja fights along Spider-Man against an evil sorcerer. The writers cleverly use a museum and some ancient artifacts to connect Sonja's world to the modern day New York home of Spider-Man. It's pretty epic seeing the combination of fantasy monsters and swords mixed with the classic Spider-Man quipping and web slinging. I'm sure fans who liked both comics at the time really enjoyed this crossover. In the end, Red Sonja transforms back into MJ on page 19, revealing that she was only possessed. It's one of the few examples where possession isn't necessarily a bad thing. Spidey would have had a hard time taking on this foe by himself. Number 6. Frankenstein's Monster. This issue was definitely an attempt to boost sales and create more support for Marvel's Frankenstein character, whose run started in 1973. During this story, Frankenstein recaps his origin from Frankenstein issue number 1, and he talks a bit about his battles against Dracula in issues 7 through 11. So basically in the issue, Spider-Man gets blasted with a ray beam while he's trying to stop a robbery and inexplicably wakes up on a table next to Frankenstein. They escape from this castle and find themselves in the mountains and later rescue Judith Klemmer, an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., on an assignment to stop the monster maker Von Schucht, who plans to rule the world with an army of monsters. Classic. Spidey and Judith sneak in the back of his castle while Frankenstein just busts in the front door, beating the crap out of anybody who opposes him. When Frankenstein finally walks into the main chamber, he sees the monster maker releasing another prisoner against Spidey and Judith, the Man-Wolf. The story is continued in issue number 37, but I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. Number 5. Dr. Doom. I know, right? How could Spidey possibly end up on the same side as the nefarious Victor Von Doom? We actually also see Vision and Scarlet Witch in this crazy crossover. A mystical being called the Dark Rider is attempting to steal Dr. Doom's magical energies, but Spider-Man and Vision attack him together. He uses his powers to make a cat grow to a humongous size, and the heroes are kept busy battling it until Scarlet Witch hits it with a hex bolt, returning the cat to its normal size. Unfortunately, all this magic usage only strengthens the Dark Rider's power, and as Spider-Man and Vision watch on, Scarlet Witch realizes they'll have to help Dr. Doom in order to stop their common foe. They have an epic showdown, and Scarlet Witch stuns the Rider, but then he breaks free and incapacitates Doom and the Witch, leaving none to stand in his way. In the next issue, Marvel Team-Up number 44, there's a stunning conclusion where Moondragon also joins the party. It's a whole crazy host of heroes. These team-ups are a lot of fun, and they were also a great marketing tool for Marvel back in the day. Number 4. Howard the Duck. A lot of these entries are from the Marvel Team-Up series, but this next one is actually from 1996 during the Clone Saga event when Marvel had a run of Spider-Man team-ups. In this comic, we're actually treated to 2 fantastic team-ups, the first being Spider-Man and Gambit, but it's actually Spider-Man alongside Howard the Duck that I found really strange. This story crosses over with a Savage Dragon Destroyer Duck story that was in publication by Image Comics at the time. Peter Parker can hardly believe it when he overhears some bystanders say a recent robbery was committed by 2 men dressed as turtles in spacesuits. But it's really happening in this crazy crossover that incorporates the world of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Funny enough, there is actually still debate surrounding whether or not the version of Howard the Duck from this comic is canon, with some people arguing that this version of Howard is a clone and actually exists separately from the Image Comics universe. Man, it's Clone Saga, am I right? Number 3, not ready for primetime players. In this absolutely unexpected team up, Peter and Mary Jane happen to somehow have tickets to Saturday Night Live. A mysterious, powerful ring was given to a member of the cast, and the Silver Samurai has come to infiltrate the show and try to steal the ring back. We get to see John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and even Lorne Michaels as things unfold backstage in the dressing rooms, and Stan Lee is the host of SNL Tonight performing the opening monologue. Sounds like an episode of SNL I would actually want to watch. After a ton of wacky antics and drama, the samurai obtains his ring and disappears back to his own time, presumably. Luckily, the audience has no idea and thinks it was all part of the show. It turns out in the end that the ring was mailed to Belushi by mistake. It's honestly just one trope piled on top of another with a whole bunch of guest stars. So while it's not the most compelling story, it certainly makes for a very memorable comic book moment. Number 2, Aunt May and Franklin Richards. This crazy issue sees Spidey totally take the backseat while we go on a crazy escapade with Aunt May, the new Herald of Galactus. This issue opens with the death of Nova, and we see Galactus mourn the loss and contemplate what to do. He heads to Earth, hoping to ask Reed Richards for some help, but instead finds Franklin Richards at the circus with Peter and his Aunt May. He decides he's going to take Franklin to be his new herald, but Franklin uses his power to transfer the transformation energy from Galactus over to May Parker, transforming her into Golden Oldie, the Herald of Galactus. She's practically a sentient Twinkie in this paper-thin advertisement, but it still has a lot of heart. She collects all of the Twinkies on Earth to satiate Galactus, but it simply isn't enough, and eventually she finds an entire Twinkie planet, which Galactus promptly devours. Then May comes on back to Earth, and Pete wakes up at the end discovering it was all a dream. Then another person wakes up seeing that that was just a dream, and there's a few panels of that. It's a pretty funny ending to the whole comic. Number 1, Spider-Man and Ren and Stimpy. No doubt one of the weirdest crossovers I've seen, but it was still a fun one. It's Ren and Stimpy number 6, where Spider-Man shows up. He definitely gave them a boost because their run went on for 44 issues altogether. If you didn't know, Ren and Stimpy was a popular Nickelodeon show from the 90s that also had a Marvel Comics series. Spidey steps in to replace Powdered Toast Man, the beloved mascot of our duo's favorite breakfast cereal. Spidey reveals that he's just stepping in to temporarily fill the job, as Toastman is currently being mind controlled by the evil Donut. The whole thing is full to the brim with puns and stuff. Toastman hurling razor sharp bread like batarangs and being called a serial offender. Donut even has to boost his testosterone at one point to help take on Spider-Man. The whole thing is weird, it's wacky, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Number 10, Frogman. Less of a team up, more of a put up with. Spider-Man and Frogman can be seen teaming up in the pages of Marvel Team Up Volume 1, Issue 131. The two reluctantly join forces to take down the White Rabbit. Most of this team up involves Spider-Man trying to get Frogman to stay out of trouble and out of his way. Frogman is actually Eugene, the son of former villain Leapfrog. In fact, Eugene even reuses his dad's costume. He and Spider-Man do end up stopping White Rabbit with the help of his dad, who Eugene thought was working for her, but who is secretly working undercover for the cops. Aw yeah. In the end, the reward money for her capture gets split up, and everything ends up happily ever after for everybody. Eugene even gets to feel like a bona fide hero. Aww. Number 9, Red Sonja. Typical Peter has to cancel a date with MJ when the Daily Bugle needs staff to cover the pandemonium ensuing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But she sneakily tags along. And when Parker transforms into Spider-Man and gets stuck in a scuffle, a sword calls out to MJ and transforms her into Red Sonja. Akin to what happened to MJ, another soul has been possessed by the evil dark wizard Kulan Ga, and the two must team up to defeat him. Fortunately, they do, and Red Sonja stops possessing MJ, who faints into Spidey's arms. Gosh, do I love this MJ/Red Sonja mashup. I feel like I need to add Red Sonja to my cosplay list. Number 8, Venom. Spider-Man and one of top arch nemesis Venom have teamed up on more than one occasion throughout their history. But when I think of Venom and Spider-Man working side by side, I always think of Carnage. Another point that makes this team up so next level crazy. Carnage is a favorite among the symbiote fans, an offspring of the Venom symbiote that attaches itself to famed serial killer Cletus Cassidy. And you can find this showdown in the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 from issues 361 to 363, titled Carnage, Part 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The other thing I love about this team up is that it involves the Human Torch, and later the entire Fantastic Four team, who are called upon to help control Venom. Oh, and also when Spider-Man and the Human Torch go to recruit Eddie Brock to help them stop Carnage, Venom almost drowns Johnny Storm. It is for this reason, if you're going to read only one of the 3-part story, I recommend issue 362. Did I also mention that this team up also appears in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, where the two reluctantly join forces to take down Carnage and Baron Mordo and stop Dormammu. Number 7. Manwolf and Frankenstein. For those of you who don't know who Manwolf is, he's like a werewolf from outer space. Yeah, that's right. He also just happens to be former astronaut John Jameson, son of Jonah Jameson. In Marvel Team Up Volume 1 issue 37, we see Spider-Man coming together with Manwolf and Frankenstein to escape the clutches of an evil mad scientist, the Monster Maker, and stop his dastardly plot. This story is a fun one, especially if you are a classic monster movie fan like myself. Number 6. Wolverine. For this team up, there are a few different places we could take you, but I'd like to take you to a short comic series called Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. In this little 6-issue series, we get to see these two very different superheroes team up after just getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The two showed up to stop a bank robbery, only to have some time-traveling diamonds blast them millions of years back to the past. It's cute, entertaining, well drawn, and well colored. And if you don't believe me, I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. One of the things I love most about this team up is how well Wolverine and Spider-Man both clash and complement one another, and the interlacing of both darkly serious and light comedic writing. Number 5. Spider-Man and Spider-Man and Spider-Man. You know, I can't do a Spider-Man list without touching on the Spider-Verse, and more specifically, the film Into the Spider-Verse. One of my favorite storylines within this Spider-Man comic, Spider-Geddon, involves the exploration of alternate Spider-Mans. I love how much the storyline has come to embrace the idea of multiple spider people, or spider totems as they are often referred. All of these team-ups are linked by the idea that there are an unlimited number of universes, all connected by spider totems, different versions of Spider-Man, who are stationed in their own universe and are responsible for protecting it. Great threats to the multiverse, however, often require our alternates to take part in mass level team-ups in the comics. If you are more a fan of the Marvel Cinematic world, you will perhaps be more experienced with the very loose adaptation of the Spider-Verse storyline, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was released in 2018, and experienced much critical and financial success. And if you aren't familiar with this film, like, you need to be. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Number 4. Deadpool. On the opposite team-up side of Wolverine, we have Deadpool, who has a similar writing style to Spider-Man, though much more of his material could be considered more adult or crude. Not only have these two teamed up multiple times, and both have been Avengers, but they also have their own entire series together. And it's hilarious, as you may have already predicted. Spider-Man / Deadpool tells the story of Deadpool seeking out Spider-Man's help and confessing that Spider-Man has always been a role model. Cute. Eventually, Wade wins Spider-Man over despite the fact that Spider-Man does seem to often get annoyed by Deadpool's antics. The two take down all sorts of villains, including the first semi-big bad, Patient Zero, and complete all kinds of heroic acts together, including, but not limited to, saving Christmas. Number 3. Cast of SNL. I could explain this comic in full to you all, but I kind of feel like it would ruin it. This team up comes to us from the Marvel Team Up Series Volume 1, issue 74. In that issue, you can see the cast of SNL as hosted by none other than Stan Lee team up with Spider-Man to fight some samurai. Yep. It is the epitome of everything that is super 70s in the comics, neatly wrapped up in one issue. The only thing that makes me sad about this team up is that we didn't get more of it. Number 2. Mysterio. In the newest Spider-Man film Far From Home, we will be seeing Mysterio team up with Spider-Man. And if the trailers are to be believed, we will also see Mysterio be welcomed into the Avengers. This isn't the first time villain and hero have teamed up. We also see the two team up to defeat Doc Ock in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issue 686. Mysterio is probably one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains, an illusionist and trickster who often cannot be trusted. Okay, so there are two ways this team up could end in Far From Home. Number 1, Mysterio is retconned as a superhero in the film who maybe later turns villain, but you know, not yet. Or number 2, Mysterio is teaming up with Spider-Man simply to betray him. While Mysterio's motives are yet unclear, it is almost certainly guaranteed that Far From Home will at least allow us to see these two fight side by side at some point, granting us at least a small amount of team-up time for these two heroes. Number 1. Superman. Okay, so yes, while this DC and Marvel crossover is titled Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, by the end of the comic the two are on the same page. And I had to include it because, like most of us, I do enjoy a good DC Marvel crossover every now and then. This one-off involves Lex Luthor and Doc Ock teaming up to pit the two heroes against each other, though in the end Spider-Man and Superman join forces to save their lady loves, Lois Lane and MJ, who have been kidnapped by the villains. And of course, they prevail, save the day, and you know, end up as buds. Number 10. Deadpool, Wolverine, and Captain America. The Marvel storyline The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is a part of one of the Deadpool series, sees the three powerhouses team up. The series mainly follows Deadpool, who approaches the fellow heroes, looking to team up as he thinks someone is targeting Weapons Plus alumni. The other two heroes refuse to join him, which leads to him being captured by a villain who goes by the name Butler. He escapes to discover a group of alternate X-Men made from Deadpool's organs and other regenerated X-Men bits, and sort of Deadpool's regeneration ability, like holding them together. With the help of them and Captain America and Wolverine, who Wade also finds out were kidnapped by the Butler as well, he defeats the villain. Unfortunately, his daughter and her mother Carmelita were also kidnapped by the Butler and perished before Deadpool and the rest of the team could save them. This time they actually ruined everything as a team in Deadpool's instance. He lost his family as a result of the fact that Cap and Wolverine just didn't join him soon enough. Number 9. Wolverine and Spider-Man. Yeah, there are certain superheroes who just kinda make bad teammates, and Wolverine is kind of one of those superheroes. Spider-Man isn't usually, but there are certain people he just really doesn't get along with well. Of course, their differences have also made them a strong team, as these two do tend to team up quite a bit in the comics. But I'm specifically talking about a time when they swapped bodies. One, this team up is also just awful in regards to the storyline. It happens in Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1 when Jean Grey gets mad at Logan for hitting on her, and causes him and Peter Parker to swap bodies by using her powers, which seems a little severe and kind of unfair to Peter. The two damage one another's bodies somewhat, but the end of this comic issue is what is truly terrifying. The swap ends with the horrifying implication that Wolverine tried to sleep with teenage MJ while in Peter's body. Ugh, that's really gross. Number 8. Batman, Hellboy, and Starman. Yeah, you're probably wondering what is going on with this one. This crossover happened in the late 90s and is a 2-part short series that actually has a really awesome story, but was also kind of oddly done. It's a little spooky trade-off series revolving around Hellboy taking down a neo-Nazi group. In part 1, he works with Batman to save Ted Knight from the neo-Nazi group called Knights of October. But then in part 2, as Starman is joining the group once he's saved, Batman reveals that he has to dip to go deal with some Joker stuff back in Gotham. So then Batman leaves and sends Starman and Hellboy on a private jet to the Amazon rainforest, where they work to track down the leader of the villainous group who managed to escape in the original tussle of part 1. And the two then also have to take on a demon in typical Hellboy fashion. This spooky team up is almost ruined by the weird, swap out of our heroes. Seems like Batman just wasn't feeling the part 2 of this crossover, or maybe just wasn't feeling working with Starman? Makes me wonder if he really did have business to attend to, or if he just wanted out of the team up. Number 7. Punisher and Archie. Yes, this really happened. This team up sounds like it was a terrible idea, but it actually sold fairly well, despite most people thinking it was a joke when it was announced. The Punisher is employed by the government to hunt and capture, not kill, Red, a drug dealer who looks similar to Archie. Red escapes the Punisher and attempts to lie low in Riverdale, where he uses his legitimate business connections to finagle his way into Hiram Lodge's mansion. The Punisher tracks Red down to Riverdale and thinks he spots him in an ice cream shop, but he's really spotting Archie and Jughead. However, Punisher's team isn't the only one tracking Red. Another group is also tracking him, one that is comprised of thugs who aim to kill Red before he can be caught and potentially snitch out the rest of the operation. They kidnap Archie and Jughead before Punisher can get to them. Meanwhile, Veronica takes Red on a date to the school dance in an attempt to make Archie jealous. Eventually things all work out and Punisher figures out who the real Red is, and even thinks Riverdale is pretty nice and that Archie is a pretty alright kid. He leaves with his bounty and a gift from Miss Grundy, I don't know, and later gets to resume his violent ways. And Archie goes back to his wholesome life. Well, sort of. Because now we have the show Riverdale, which definitely paints the town of Riverdale more in the vein of what Punisher originally expected. Number 6. Venom and Hulk. The Incredible Hulk vs. Venom is a bizarre but fantastic one-shot that imagines what would happen if these two terrifying heroes teamed up. While the time period it comes out of makes you question Venom's capacity for heroics, in this comic he is seen trying to heroically save people in the aftermath of an earthquake. During this he runs into the Hulk, who fights him thinking he's a villain. This version of the Hulk is also oddly well spoken. Eventually the two realize they are both after the same guy, Dr. Bad Vibes, who was claiming to be behind the earthquakes. They team up to take him down, but find out that the earthquake was a result of natural causes, and that Dr. Bad Vibes is just a crazy guy with an earthquake button who thinks that it works. The idea of these two coming after you is pretty terrifying. They almost don't decide to work together, but I'm glad they do, because this mashup is oddly delightful. Number 5. Sentry and the Dark Avengers. Okay, granted Sentry is a part of Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, but he's probably the only member that you could, outside of the Dark Avengers, consider a hero when it comes to the assembly of this once villainous team. What's more scary than Sentry on a regular hero day? Sentry under the control of Norman Osborn. Sentry, when he joined the Dark Avengers, believed he was guilty for the death of his wife, and because of this, his moral compass is somewhat misaligned and off-kilter. He doesn't really see anything he's doing is wrong, and tries to be a hero during these dark times. However, as many heroic deeds as the Dark Avengers try to accomplish, the way they go about things is often what makes them scary, and is what sometimes makes them actually unable to accomplish the true heroics that the original team of Avengers often successfully completed. Number 4. Iron Man, Black Panther, and sort of Batman. This team up originally sounds awesome in principle, but it was part of a dreadful series called Marvel that was the result of a competition between Bill Jamaas, John Casada, and Peter David as to who could sell more issues. This series was Bill Jamaas' entry. In issue 2, he puts these 3 heroes together who assemble to stop kids from handing out money. Obviously Batman isn't really there, as Bill Jamaas did not get DC's permission, but the character looks a lot like Batman and talks about his dead parents, so yeah. The victims in the comic, that is the bystanders accepting money that is being donated to them, berate the heroes for being rich and selfish. The heroes respond by violently beating them up and killing them. Iron Man even uses his repulsor beams to just straight up obliterate someone upon arriving at the scene. Goodness. If that isn't terrifying, I don't know what is. Number 3. Old Man Logan and Hawkeye. During the Old Man Logan storyline in the 2008 Wolverine series, we see Old Man, Hawkeye, and Logan team up. Logan is hired by now blind Hawkeye to help him make a delivery across the futuristic wasteland. Despite being blind, it seems like Hawkeye has developed a Raider-like sight, similar to Daredevil, making him still a crack shot and still able to even drive. Wow. The two come up against all sort of supervillains, including a T-Rex from the Savage Lands that is bonded with the Venom symbiote. Yet still, this deadly duo doesn't quite get everything right in the end. It turns out the delivery Hawkeye is aiming to make is 99 vials of super soldier serum in a now grossly unsuper world. He is supposed to be delivering the vials to someone who wants to create a new team of Avengers, but he gets double crossed and murdered in the process, and almost gets Logan killed too. Whoa. Number 2. Eminem and Punisher. Well, I was actually kind of excited when I first heard about this team up. I was unfortunately let down by it. Eminem is a huge superhero fan, in case you didn't know, so seeing him team up with the Punisher could be interesting and awe-inspiring. The standalone team-up series was originally slated to be a 2-parter, but it ended up just being a 1-issue, probably as a result of it being kind of a letdown. The duo are terrifying together and spend part of the comic beating up on one another despite being on the same side. Punisher is there to protect Mathers from Barracuda, Eminem's old friend and apparently a contract killer who is trying to complete a hit on Mathers. The fight ends with them out on a frozen lake. Eminem gets away, manages to borrow a chainsaw from a fan who is ice fishing, and comes back to save Punisher, who is getting his butt kicked by Barracuda. The comic ends with Punisher turning on Eminem for trying to kill him, but he only shoots around him, putting him on like a floating iceberg and just tossing him a satellite phone, calling Marshall a criminal for killing Barracuda and trying to kill him, but then saying that they're even. What a weird one-shot. Number 1. Spawn and Batman. Oh my goodness, I wish there was more than one issue of this fantastically dark duo. These two heroes meet up in New York where Batman is tracking an arsenal of robots who are built to use human brains as their own, as well as a ton of weapons. He runs into Spawn and the two fight one another, suspicious of each other, almost eliminating the other hero in the process. Eventually though, they realize they're on the same side and team up to stop the robots. One thing I really love about this team up is the way Batman is drawn. Todd McFarlane draws the iconic Spawn style artistry in the issue, and Frank Miller is behind the writing helm for this one. It truly is a dark, gritty, gruesome little one-shot.
In at number 10, Thanos and the Thing. The saying, "the enemy of my enemy is my friend," rings ever so true when it comes to the odd pairing of Thanos and the Thing. Ben Grimm has been part of the Fantastic Four for a long time and is well aware of the horrible villains that exist throughout the Marvel Universe. As a result of his space explorations with the Fantastic Four, he's come into contact with Thanos on a number of occasions. Recognizing just how dangerous the Mad Titan is, the Fantastic Four have shut down a number of evil plans Thanos had up his big gold glove. However, during the Secret Wars timeline, the narrative between the Thing and Thanos kinda changed. At the start, Ben Grimm was acting as the vast wall to protect the God Emperor Doom and was in charge of keeping out the people who sought to overthrow him. However, in comes Thanos, who took a different approach to breaching the wall. Instead, he leveled with the Thing and helped him escape this boring service of just acting like a wall. Thanos reminded Ben that the world was not right and that it needed him. Whether or not these words came with ill intentions, it was still a superhero supervillain team up against Dr. Doom that you wouldn't believe would ever exist. In at number 9, Dracula and the X-Men. The X-Men and Dracula have gone head to head on a number of occasions in the past. The Lord of Vampires even attempted to force Storm into marrying him. Gross. Although after some time it turned out they hated his son. You see, his son was planning a much more evil takeover than anything his father had ever attempted. Seeking to take his father's spot as the top vampire supervillain, he engineered this biological weapon. The weapon's purpose was to turn regular civilians into bloodthirsty vampires. In a surprising turn of events though, the X-Men, Dracula, and even Blade joined forces in order to restore order to the world. Although he was able to turn Jubilee right before they could defeat him, Dracula did give her an amulet that would combat this new fear of sunlight. Consider it a gift of appreciation to the X-Men. Still an unlikely team up. In at number 8, Nova and Carnage. During the event known as Axis, the Uncanny Avengers were attempting to stop the Red Skull who had stolen Charles Xavier's brain. I know, gross, right? In comes Magneto, who demolishes the villain, but accidentally unlocks this psionic energy within him that releases Onslaught into the universe. Now with Onslaught being the Uncanny Avengers' biggest threat, the Scarlet Witch decided to reverse the alignments of the heroes and villains. Carnage just happened to be amongst them when this went down, so in a strange turn of events, Carnage actually started to befriend Nova. Although this odd team up only lasted for a moment and purely out of circumstance, they were working together. Eventually the spell was reversed though, and Carnage went back to his usual crazy self. In at number 7, Galactus and Cosmic Ghost Rider. We know this list is supposed to be the top team ups you won't believe exist, but I just have to add that this team up is by far the coolest team up ever, without a doubt. First of all, you have this possible future where Thanos just completely decimates the Earth, taking out all of the heroes, or so he thought. In comes Frank Castle, who survives and is now fueled by revenge. He cuts a deal with Mephisto to host the Spirit of Vengeance. Although in his hunt for Thanos on Earth, he realizes that the Mad Titan had already left. Then you get the supervillain Galactus arriving to Earth also in search of Thanos after barely making it through their battle. And the two make quite the team. In at number 6, Norman Osborn and the Sentry. This is a team up again that only really occurred out of pure circumstance. When learning about the details, you actually really start to sympathize with the Sentry and his inner struggles. After the final battle of the Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn swooped in, dispatching the Skrull Queen to be viewed as a national hero. Now with this prominent position in the public eye, he was made the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. In this position, he formed what was known as the Dark Avengers. The majority of the team was comprised of villains, with the Sentry being one of the few superheroes who agreed to stay. You see, Norman had convinced Bob Reynolds that he understood his internal battles with the Void. Not only did he show the Sentry compassion, but he promised that he could help him keep control over it. In at number 5, Hank Pym and Ultron. Standing as one of the definitely more unique hero-villain team-ups, Hank Pym viewed his creation of Ultron as one of his greatest regrets, and after the events of Rage of Ultron, both Hank and Ultron had merged with one another. There's actually still a belief that traces of Hank can still be found within Ultron, even though he denied this when confronted by Adam Warlock in Infinity Countdown. This isn't necessarily a team up for the sake of fighting off a greater force, but rather an attempt by Hank Pym to stop Ultron. Nonetheless, even forced together, the two had to still work with each other from time to time. In at number 4, Deathlock and Uncanny X-Force. With the Marvel Universe having so many alternate timelines and possible futures, the one that saw the rise of Deathlocks was perhaps the most grim. Many of the Marvel heroes were converted into Deathlocks, which became a mandate just like the Superhuman Registration Act. Cut to present day, the Deathlocks arrived attempting to steal Phantom X's artificial portable biome, which was called the World. Deathlock Prime was able to overpower these new violent tendencies with logic and reasoning. With his newfound hope, he sought to help Phantom X against his former team. He actually succeeds in protecting the world, and as a result of his good deed, he teams up with the X-Force. Over time, Deathlock established himself as a friend of the X-Men, and even began to lecture at Logan's Jean Grey School. In at number 3, Super Skrull and Nova. This is a true tale of how just one team up could alter a character's whole reality. See, Super Skrull had been on the receiving end of mockery by his people for a long time after failing to take down the Fantastic Four. However, during the events of Annihilation, he put this behind him in order to protect his people not just from the Annihilation Wave, but soon Ultron as well. Super Skrull could not have done this alone though. Teaming up with Nova and his team of cosmic heroes, Super Skrull was finally able to redeem himself. With the help of Nova, he was able to return to his home, but this time he was praised for his efforts. They even made him a representative for intergalactic affairs. In at number 2, Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange. Sounds like a reality show. Right before Secret Wars, the majority of the Marvel multiverse was just beginning to collapse. Each unique world began crashing into one another, leaving almost nothing left. This catastrophic problem would require the universe's greatest minds to set aside their differences and combine their efforts in order to save, well, everything and everyone. The two people we're speaking about is Doctor Strange and Doctor Doom, along with some help by Molecule Man of course. The Beyonders happen to be the cause of all of these issues, so both men decided the only way was to steal their power. Eventually they succeeded, but this also enacted the new reign of the God Emperor Doom, who put Doctor Strange as kind of his right hand man, making Strange essentially a sheriff that would uphold Doom's new laws. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Annihilus and the Avengers. As we reach the end of this list, it's funny to look at how some of these villains go from such evil plots to becoming key players in assisting the superheroes. Annihilus is one of those stories. Once known as the largest threat in the Marvel Universe, he used his cosmic control rod combined with his annihilation wave to leave nothing but total destruction throughout the cosmos. Eventually Nova and his alliance was able to put a stop to this madness, but Annihilus would soon return. However, this time he was in the form of a larvae which would regrow into his previous self. Soon enough though, Annihilus was now part of the Intergalactic Councils during the events of Infinity. This was the largest council of nations across space and even included the Avengers. At the time, the Avengers' main focus was attempting to stop the Builders from wiping out the universe, and as part of his new role, Annihilus lended a hand.